Hello, welcome to Michelle Reads Books. Today we are talking about Further Chronicles of Avonlea by L.M. Montgomery. So this book is a collection of short stories, kind of tangentially related to the Anne of Green Gables series, and this is what I consider the last of the Anne of Green Gables series. And since it's a collection of short stories, I feel like my impressions are different for every different story. Each story has its own character and gives me a different impression. Also, I think much more highly of some stories than I do of others, and so I think that it's important to give my opinions per story and not for the whole book. All right, so I would like to give a summary of each story and then my opinions after each one. Aunt Cynthia's Persian Cat. Aunt Cynthia leaves her beloved Persian cat Fatima on the care of her nieces, Sue and Ismay Mead. Despite their reluctance, Fatima disappears and the nieces advertise for a cat to replace her and end up buying Fatima herself, only to discover the cat alive and well in the attic. This is one of those ironic stories where everything that they try to do ends up going awry. Everything. So it's very much a comedy of errors kind of a story. So in that sense, I think it is kind of fun. It's comedy of errors, comic relief kind of a story. All right, the materializing of Cecil. Embarrassed by the fact that she has never had a romantic interest, Charlotte Holmes makes up a story about a former suitor named Cecil Fenwick of New Brunswick. Then a man named Cecil Fenwick of New Brunswick actually shows up. After confronting her about the rumors about them, Cecil decides to actually court her. I loved this story. It was so funny. It was one of those coincidences over coincidences that couldn't possibly happen in real life. And yet it's not impossible for it to happen, If you make up a story about somebody and give them names and details and stuff, and then somebody shows up that matches all of those names and details, that's pretty impressive. But then I also love that it ends up being a romance in the end, after all. So yeah, I thought it was a really sweet story, and I really liked that one. Her Father's Daughter. Rachel Spencer has been raised apart from her father after her parents quarreled years ago. Rachel now wants to invite her father to her wedding despite her mother's insistence that they never meet again. This one was very frustrating. I feel like you see the parents quarrel, and then the mother just decides to keep her away from her father. That's not right. It's really not right. And was upset every time that she showed any similarity to her father. And the problem was she was kind of similar to her father. And she does meet him by chance one time, that they keep a secret and they never share it. I don't know. I don't like that. The way custody was arranged back then, and how nobody really had any rights, that if somebody just decided this is how it is, then that's how it was. So I found it a very frustrating story. It kind of had an okay ending, but it was also pretty sad, in my opinion. So I don't know. It wasn't my favorite. Jane's Baby. Rosetta Ellis hears that her cousin Jane is dying, and that she wanted to leave her baby to Rosetta's sister, Charlotte Wheeler. Rosetta feels that she is more qualified to care for the baby, so she fights to keep the baby, while Charlotte also fights for her. The feud eventually ends when a crisis brings the sisters together. I also found this one quite frustrating. It was one of those, why are you fighting over a child? I understand that you think that you're better at it than your sister, but she was left the child. You should just offer her your help if she needs it. But who says that she isn't good at taking care of a child if she's never tried? So, I just felt like it was very frustrating to see the two of them fighting constantly over a baby that, and they also changed the names if depending on who had her. It was just people, couldn't you sit down and talk about this, because you're acting like children? I found that one frustrating. The Dream Child. David's wife, Josie, is suffering from audio hallucinations, where she hears a child crying following the death of their son. Over the course of weeks, they walk to the beach searching for the child daily. Eventually, they actually find a child washed up in a small boat, bringing the audio hallucinations to an end. This one was terrifying. Like, imagine going insane to the point where you hear audio hallucinations because you had lost a child and you are sure that that child is calling you. Like, it's frightening, it's terrifying. But at the same time, watching those hallucinations end after she actually finds a child who had been abandoned, they end up tracking down where he came from, and he had been abandoned and was available to take care of. And so they were just going to ask if it was okay if they take care of him for a while because it was doing his wife such good. But then it was, oh, he doesn't actually have family, so at least not available. So they went ahead and basically adopted him. So I do like that ending ended up for that child, but the idea of going insane following a death of a family member is just terrifying. So in that sense, it was a creepy story. The Brother Who Failed. The Monroe family is a wildly successful family having a reunion. One ignorant aunt suggests that Robert is the only failure of the family. The rest of the family does not feel that way about him at all and set up a demonstration of his success because he enabled their success through life. I really love this. Sometimes you can't see the success of somebody else, even if it's not very visible. Like, are you a successful person if you haven't like made lots of money or become very famous? Can you be successful anyway? And the answer is yes, you absolutely can. Success doesn't depend upon the accolades of others, but I do appreciate that his family, who have worldly success, were willing to acknowledge this brother who had supported them along the way. I think it's a really beautiful story. The Return of Hester. Hester Meredith forces her sister Margaret to promise her never to marry Hugh Blair on her deathbed. Margaret keeps her promise despite loving Hugh. One night, the ghost of Hester brings them together. Once again, I found this very frustrating. Like, the sister just decided that her sister should never marry? Like, how rude is that? Like, that's very, very selfish. Besides the fact that you're dying, like, you're not even going to be around. Why do you care what she does after you die? And, like, it's just incredibly selfish person. And then, when her ghost has to come back to, like, lead them together. So I guess it was meant as kind of a ghost, like, love story. Like, I found Hester as a character too frustrating to really enjoy it that much. You know, The Little Brown Book of Miss Emily. Anne Shirley and Diana Barry become friends with an older single woman named Emily Leith. After her death, she sends Anne her diary of when she was a young adult. It tells the story of her romance of her youth that she eventually ends after being told that she would bring her future husband down and that he had great things ahead of him. I found this story quite sad. First of all, that so apparently she was very beautiful as a young woman, and then, like, looked completely different as an adult. And I don't know. I don't like their descriptions of how she looks afterwards. Like, you can't be beautiful if you're overweight and, like, have a round face. I don't know. It just seems really strange to me. Like, their standards of beauty, I guess that was sign of the times. But also that it was so hard to believe that she had a romance, and that she was told that her like, boyfriend was going to do great things and that she would just be a burden to him. And so she breaks it off? Like, really? I don't know. Like, it seems really sad to me. But, that's my opinion. I feel like that's a bit dated. That story is. Sarah's Way. Sarah is a young woman who seems to care for things more when they need help or support in some way, and had been resisting all attempts to set her up with Lige Baxter, who she finds too perfect. When his business fails, Sarah immediately comes to Lige's defense. I struggled with pronouncing the name Lige. I think it's Lige and not Lige, which would be weird, right? So I think it's Lige, but who's named Lige anyway? But they're like having this young woman who only likes people if they need her. I guess some people are like that, but I think it's a little bit odd, that's all. And how she was like, no way, I'm never going to marry him, absolutely not. And he had asked, and she was 100% against it, and then he loses money, and she's like, okay, I'll marry you, this is great, then I'll be a help to you, I guess. I don't know, I don't really like that your decision of marriage would be based on the need of your partner. I mean, wouldn't it be something how you feel yourself? I'm just saying. The son of his mother. Thyra Carew has an unhealthy relationship with her son Chester. She forbids his relationship with Damaris Garland because of the ban. Chester decides to go to sea instead. He becomes lost at sea, and Thyra becomes close to Damaris while searching for him. Once again, very frustrating. Thyra just deciding what her son is allowed to do. He's an adult. Like, dude, let him, date somebody if that's what he wants. No, I found that very frustrating. And even though she sort of came around, I feel like she needed to have this unhealthy obsession relationship. And so when Chester disappears, then she puts it all onto Damaris and is like, you're my daughter now and whatever. Like, dude, you don't want to be this woman's daughter. She's horrible. I don't know. So that's just my opinion. The education of Betty. Stephen Douglas goes to visit an old girlfriend when her husband dies. He offers to marry her, but she refuses. Instead, she asks him to help her with her daughter Betty. Stephen supervises her education and eventually sends her to boarding school. When she returns, she is now an adult, and Stephen starts to develop deeper feelings for Betty. Even though he tries to set her up with somebody else, then he ends up actually marrying her himself. I find that age gap relationship quite problematic, considering he was around the same age as her mother. Yeah. Nah, not a fan. I'm not a big fan. I think that did not age well, especially since, okay, so Betty was an adult when they eventually got engaged. I think she was 19 or something like that, maybe 20. But he was in his mid 40s. I'm in my mid 40s now. Like, thought of dating a 20-year-old is just like, no, they're just children. Like, they look like children to me. And that's because I'm so much older. I couldn't do it. I couldn't ever do it. And I can't really imagine a very healthy relationship with that large of an age gap. But I know there are some out there, so no offense to those people who have them. I'm just saying that would absolutely not be for me ever. I cannot imagine it. So it is very uncomfortable reading it, having him watch her grow up like as a literal child. When he intervenes, she's like 9 or 10. And just watching that, like her behavior then, and like trying to guide her into better behavior, because she's quite a tomboy at first, and then eventually marrying her. It's like, where did that come from? Yeah, I guess somewhere, I don't know. And the fact that she's a child, I don't know. It bothers me. It did not age well. In her selfless mood, Eunice Carr was forced to promise her mother to look after her brother Christopher on her deathbed. Going through the years, Eunice keeps her promise, despite all kinds of hardship, as well as rejection by Christopher himself. Eunice makes the best of her situation, but returns to Christopher whenever he needs her, including when he gets very, very ill. And yeah. The thing is, I found this story quite frustrating as well, because Eunice was so badly treated, like, by everybody, including her beloved brother. And it's just so frustrating how everybody's like, oh, well, Eunice will do it because she does everything, Great. Yay. And then when Christopher marries, he kind of rejects Eunice and kind of sends her away. And she goes to stay with the cousin, but then she comes back when he gets very sick and decides to take care of him. And it's just like Eunice has no life outside of her brother. And I think that that's kind of sad. It's very tragic. She deserves happiness as well as anybody else. And the fact that they like justify this by explaining that she's very plain looking. Are you kidding me? Plain looking people are just as deserving of love as other people. I'm just saying. So I feel like this is playing into that trope. Did not age well, once again. The conscience case of David Bell. David Bell is the only person in the congregation who had never stood up to testify in church. People begin to talk about the reason he hasn't yet. Eventually, he stands up to explain why it took so long and confesses to a mistake that he still feels guilty about. It was a very simple mistake. All he had done was somebody had given him some counterfeit money, and when he realized it, instead of reporting it, he donated it to like a charity cause, knowing that it was counterfeit. I mean, was that a good thing to do? No, but should that haunt you the rest of your life? Also, no. Come on, I'm sure they figured it out, and I'm sure they were fine. I don't know. It's just, come on. It was a mistake. It was a mistake, and it's okay to move on and move past it. Anyway, I feel like he felt too guilty about it, but it does speak to his character as a good person. Only a common fellow. Philippa Clark is set to marry Mark Foster, but is feeling sad about it. She doesn't love him. She misses her previous lover, Owen Blair, who is reported dead. Philippa's stepmother insisted that she marry Mark. It comes out later that Owen is not dead and has been trying to contact Philippa for months, which the stepmother is stopping. Owen returns the day of the wedding, and Mark, Philippa, and Owen must work out what they will do. I don't like this story at all for a couple of reasons. And that is, first of all, the stepmother's insistence that she marry somebody she doesn't love. She's insistent. And then her stopping the contact from Owen. And then when Owen does show back up, he said, I'm back and we were engaged before I left. I want to marry Philippa. And they're like, well, Philippa's getting married today to Mark. And then Mark is like, wait, what happened? And then he realizes that Philippa's being forced to marry him. And even though he likes her a lot, he's like, Philippa will not marry Owen on her own because she's already promised to Mark. And so eventually Mark has to explain, hey, I don't want you to marry me against your will. And eventually gives her basically to Owen. And it's like, if that's really what you want, that's what I want for you. So the best person in the whole story is Mark Foster. And they keep calling him a common fellow. He's not a common fellow. And because he's plain looking. And that's another thing, is the emphasis on the looks aspect and whether or not you deserve love based on how you look. I don't love that. So that's my take on that one. It's not my favorite story. Tanis of the Flats. Jerome Carey, telegraph officer in the Flats, a trading station in the Canadian Northwest, begins paying attention to Tanis Dumont, a beautiful half-Native American girl. He never took that relationship seriously, and he falls in love with Eleanor Blair of Avonlea. Tanis is angry. Jerome is no longer interested in her, but she goes above and beyond for him when he becomes fatally injured. I hate this story. I'm telling you right now. I hate this story. It is full of racism, terms that I wouldn't even use in the summary because they're so disrespectful, that I'm not even going to use now. It is a terrible story. The way they talk about Tanis as if she were some sort of animal, that, of course, reacted this way because that kind of animal always reacts that way. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? And like, the entire story, beginning to end, is the worst story I have ever read from L.M. Montgomery. And that you've already heard me talk about a couple others that I'm not the biggest fan of. This one I hate. I hate this story. And it is just so very, very racist. I just can't. So it does reveal that L.M. Montgomery is quite racist, which I did not know until I read this one story. It is very disappointing to learn something like that. And it's an extremely disrespectful story, and I would encourage everyone who is a fan of the Anne of Green Gables series and wants to read the whole thing to skip the last story. This is the last story in the last book of the Anne of Green Gables series, and it is the absolute worst. If you are going to skip one story, skip this one. It's awful. All right, rant over. My general opinion on the entire book is that there are a lot of sweet stories, a lot of interesting things that happen. I don't think it's required reading for the fan of Anne of Green Gables in general, but I do feel like if you enjoy Ellen Montgomery's style in general, then sure, go ahead and read them. They're fun. Just skip the last one. But there is a lot of emphasis on looks, and if somebody is pretty, then they are deserving of love. I don't like that aspect of it, and I feel like this is an intrinsic belief in the author, and it kind of bothers me that that's how she felt. Anyway, so yeah, that's my general opinion, and let me know what you thought down in the comments below, and happy reading.